I'm not going to introduce the candidates per se. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and talk about their party's platforms. So I'm not quite sure who got number one. Kia ora Nanaia.
Kia ora. Of course I did. I'm sure you actually put it right there. E haere tonu ana ngā mihi kua mihia no reira tēnei te tautoko ana, ngā whakaro a Ngāti Mahanga, Ngāti Wairere, Ngāti Haua, e pōwhiri mai tātou katoa ki Te Kōpū Mānia o Kirikiriroa i raro i tēnei o ngā whare. Kia amaoki a tātou katoa, ahakoa kōwai, ahakoa nōwhia, no reira tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa e mihi ana ki ngā kaitono, mō tēnei rohe o Hauraki-Waikato, waimari e ngā kaipōti, te kite atu, te katoa, e tono atu, he wahine. He pai tērā. Nō reira, e mihi ana ki a tātou katoa. Firstly, can I also acknowledge Janice and the PSA for organising this event so that we have the opportunity to talk about issues that are relevant to the membership. To those of the membership that aren't here, I hope that we provide you with enough information to make an informed choice, because this is an important election. Never before have we been confronted with choices so stark. And I know that 6 years in government, Labor has to demonstrate that not only have we made gains that have moved the dial significantly forward for workers, for low to modest income people, for our most vulnerable population groups, for those who struggle, but we've also done it in a way that has enabled our economy to function in our interest, that has invested in the priorities that matter to us, like health and education and housing, but also that pushes the dial forward for Māori. So I'm going to touch on some of those things because the choices are very stark. Let me briefly acknowledge the other candidates for Hauraki-Waikato. I've had the privilege to serve in this electorate and gain the trust and support of many voters over a long period of time, and I've not taken it for granted. And the reason why is because I know that voters in this electorate expect a lot, and they should. And I've been through the ups and downs. I've been a union member ever since I had the opportunity to start work, and that was when I was a cleaner at the Huntly Power Station. I joined the servos, and that's now Air 2. I am still a member of Air 2. And the reason why is because that has informed my conviction about why I am in politics. Come from a small community, same community as Hana, and we are homegrown politicians. And our homegrown politic is that our communities need to be advanced in ways where we own the solutions. Whānau-centred, locally led, government enabled, and all the time that I've been in Parliament, that's what I've done. But here's the thing, even though we've made the kinds of progress that we have made, and I can point to many in education, pay parity for kohanga reo teachers, actually making sure we've got matariki as the first Indigenous holiday, contributing to Matatini to see our culture, not only in Aotearoa platform, but around the world, increased pay for our teachers, ensuring that our schools are invested in so that they can have better classrooms to teach our kids, more Māori teachers. In health, moving towards a Māori Health Authority, ensuring that our nurses get more pay, but also our community workers as well, and we need to do more in that space, I acknowledge that. And making sure that we're going to reverse the inequity that exists in the health system in a way that assures each and every one of our whānau, no matter whether they live in Te Aroha, Te Koeti or Tuakau, that they will get access to those health services, removing co-payments and up to 30, making sure basic, universal dental care is free. Those are the things that we're moving forward on, and there is more. In housing, now this is the hardest thing, because we only need to look down Ulster Street. There's around about 500 kids in transitional housing, and I don't think that's good enough. And during COVID, we've tried to ensure that we're increasing the supply of housing. We've actually got more consents for homes in Hamilton than we've had over the last 5 years. But the thing about that is that the supply chain is pretty constrained, but we're going to continue to invest in public housing. And then when I think about the economy, we're trying to ensure that we invest in schools. Here we are at Wintec, apprenticeships, earning while you learn, help our kids, making sure that the contracts go locally, not overseas to big companies. Those are all the gains. Let me finish on this. The choice is very stark, because an ACT-led national government enabled by New Zealand First will take us backwards, and we only need to look at their billboards to see how destructive, how divisive that is. And I'm talking to the membership now. What we need to do is make sure every household is registered to vote and that they exercise their conscience. I will not dumb down the vote in the Hauraki-Waikato electorate. I just want to say quite simply, it's either continue to go forward, understanding that while we've made gains, we've still got more to do, or go backwards with the other lot. And if we do nothing at all, which is our biggest threat, not going to the polling booth, then we're leaving it up to chance, and we can't do that. October the 2nd, you can place an early vote, right up until October the 14th. In Hauraki-Waikato, make that vote choice, and it's my pleasure to serve. Tēnā koutou.
Very new at this, so please forgive me, and I apologise in advance. When I get nervous, I probably mumble and talk too fast, so it just requires you to listen fast. Tainui te waka Waikato te awa maunga tautari, te maunga kuriki kahukura, te iwi. Ko waio, I'm the wife of one husband. I am the mother to 4 princes, who are my princess, grandmother to 3. I know I look too young to be a grandmother, that's why they call me Glamour. I start off like that because I want you to know that I'm just as normal and down to earth as you guys are. I'm not a politician. I didn't grow up going, I want to be a politician. I actually don't understand what a politician does. But what I've seen is not good for the last 6 years. I left school when I was 15. Don't do as I did, or it probably wasn't the best. But school wasn't for me. I didn't see it how the Pākehā saw it. I couldn't learn that way. Don't sit me in front of a classroom and someone stand there and trying to give me a little something about anything, and then I just have to regurgitate it to get an A. Couldn't learn like that. I'm a hands-on girl. I get my hands dirty. That's how I learn. So for 20 years, I got pregnant at 16. I was a teenage mum, so I know that well. I am still with my then boyfriend. He's my darling, he's my husband, he's my rock. So we're now celebrating 28 years. 28 years with our 5 babies and our grandbabies, and we're still growing. I tell my older children, grow our hapu. Grow our hapu. Aotearoa is a beautiful place to live. Despite all the chaos that we're seeing in our communities, Aotearoa is still a beautiful place. So you grow mama's hapu. You bring all our grandchildren in. My kids have never experienced drugs, they've never experienced gangs, they've never experienced all that stuff. Why? Because mum chose to stay home for 20 years to raise my own children. Because I think that the family unit, having mum and dad in their roles, is important. And our fruit shows it. That our kids have never been involved in the gang life, they've never been arrested, they've never been in trouble with the law. Because that family unit, we need to bring that back. What's happened to our family units? Our crime rates are high. And then we've got a government, sorry, I don't mean to think, but we've got a government who sits there and goes, our supermarket crime's gone up 63%. Does it take a genius to realise that your people are hungry? We produce enough kai in Aotearoa to feed 40 million people. There's no excuse for our people going hungry. 40 million people. I didn't come in this to go, they're doing this and they're not doing this, and I'm just going to do my thing. Because that's all I know, and that's only my few years that I've been alive example. So fast forward to where we are now, my husband and I, we have been able to achieve our 2nd brand new home. I was the first Waikato Māori wahine for placemakers as an account manager in the midst of all these males. We're talking about pay equity and gender thing. I don't know that. I don't know that well because you weren't going to tell me what I could be or what I could do. That was me, I did that. Uneducated 15-year-old, and yet I worked my way. Mother for 20 years, remember? Then I went out into the workforce. But I wasn't going to allow society to tell me who I can be and what I can do. Don't get me wrong, it took me twice as long and twice as hard to work to where I got, but I got there. Then this blooming pandemic came in, and I get mandated out of work. Not because I was dishonest, not because I didn't turn up on time, but for a jab. that cut me deep, that really broke me, because I worked hard to get to where I was, and because of a jab, I lost my job. But it was a hard decision because we're a healthy family. We're talking about healthcare. How about we start promoting eating well, good kai? But I see a lot of our haura initiatives out there that's come get your diabetes check. How about eat properly and turn it around? That kind of stuff. Where did all that disappear? But we're so reliant on doctors. Now we want to go build more hospitals. What are we doing? Promoting more sick people. We eat and we produce good kai. Start promoting stuff like that. But anyway, that's me, and I'll probably go on after all that thing. But thank you so much for having me. And I just want to honour Nanaia. I'm in the midst of greatness. You are one of our po in politics. I just want to honour you in that. And regardless of what parties we are, I still honour you in that. So thank you. And thank you.
Koutou katoa, ngā me I nui kia koutou, e hui mai nei ko waiau, ko Donna Pokere-Phillips ahau, he uri no tainui tuwhari tō taranaki hoki ahau. Hoi anō taku hoa rangatira a tere piripi, he uri no te puaha o Waikato. It's a real privilege, is what I can say, is to stand in front of our people to have a kōrero. And it's good to see a good crowd. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the PSA for putting on an awesome hui. We had a pōhiri this morning, and I want to acknowledge all of those that attended the pōhiri. I want to acknowledge also our marae kura, Nanaia Mahuta, and as Lois has said, she has represented our community for nearly, a few decades. I won't say how many decades, but a few decades. And also our young up-and-coming leader, young Hana for Te Pāti Māori. Those that don't know me, I actually did belong to Te Pāti Māori in the last election, and I now belong to Freedom NZ, which is an umbrella party. I'm actually the co-leader of New Zealand Outdoors and Freedom Party, and the reason why I came over to this particular party is because my father was vaccine injured, and he actually died of his vaccine injury. So this is a personal kaupapa for me, and it's an important kaupapa, and it's an important message that we share, because what we have seen over the last few years, I'm saying the last 3 years since the rollout of the pandemic, is an encroachment on our Bill of Rights. Now, I started in a factory, it was a condom factory, many years ago when my babies were young. So I know what it's like to get underpaid, overworked, and spend most of your money paying the babysitter. I've been there, done that. Then one time we were working in the onion patch in Tuako, and I said to my husband, well, my husband said, you know, we had all our kids, and he said there must be a better way, and I said there is a better way, because we got $100 a row, right? And there were 6 of us, and we did it maybe 2.5 rows a day, and I said there is one. So I went to Waikato University. I now hold a master's in law with honours. So when I'm talking about New Zealand Bill of Rights and that it's been encroached, trust me, I know what I'm talking about. So what we have seen, what our party, what Freedom NZ will do, is we will we will entrench our New Zealand Bill of Rights. Why? Because it's so important. What we have seen with this current government, and National hasn't said that they're going to protect our rights, but we've seen our freedom of speech being taken from us, our freedom of assembly being taken from us, and our freedom of press. And there's a whole lot of politics. Look, if you want to understand the politics, please go to my Facebook page, because there's too much to mention in just 5 minutes, and that's Donna Pokere-Phillips is the name of my Facebook page. But what you have to understand is, because our Bill of Rights have been taken from us, what does that set up for our tamariki and our mokopuna? We're talking about pay equity. When we have no civil liberties, we don't have any Māori rights. When we don't have any civil liberties, we don't have any union rights. It means that all our rights are gone. If we don't stand up and we don't demand that our governments, one, entrench our New Zealand Bill of Rights, and while they're at it, our human rights. Because guess what? The government has entrenched the New Zealand Constitution Act 1986, which ensures that they are protected from the people. Now the people need to be protected from our governments. We've had 88 years of the same. If it's not blue, it's red. If it's not red, it's blue. We even have Te Pāti Māori. You know, Te Pāti Māori and Labour look the same to me. Their policies are the same. I know that because I helped create some of those policies. So I know what I'm talking about. If you want real opposition, then you've got to come to the Freedom Party. You need a party votes Freedom NZ so that you can get those that are not afraid to stand, and people in this room know I'm not afraid to stand, those that are willing to ask the difficult questions, because I'm not afraid of asking the difficult questions. You have to be really conscious about your vote and encourage our tamariki, our ones that are able to vote, party vote, Freedom NZ. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Taki hoa ki te ru o Waikato ano nei hei ka poka ua ke māku ki te kapu o taku ringa ka whakamiri no ai tōna aratau e tiane he tupuku aho. Wara ke ahau i te papa o te whenua, kua ki te ahau i ngā whetū e tūtakitahi ana, ko matari ki kairuri i whatutahi kei te taumata o te mahoroa. Kei te whare kāhui ariki tōku pau te whiro, kingi tū heitia, e noho mai nei runga i tō torona, rire hau, kainai. E mihi ana kia tātou i tēnei rangi o Orongo Nui, e mihi ana ki tēnei wiki o te reo Māori. E mihi ana kia tātou e karapoti nei. E mihi ana ki ngā mare kura e noho mai nei ki runga i te pai. E mihi ana hoki ki ngā ruruhi koroheke i roto i tēnei ruma kia koutou katoa. Nana Debs, aku ruruhi koroheke, wai hoki i a tātou katoa. Korohori koutou. Ko Hana-Rāwhiti tōku ingoa, heiri tēnei no ngā haue whao te motu, engari tuaku wai kai whakiaka e noho ana ki konei ki rāhui pōkeka. I started with that tongikura, or that chant that came from Kingi Tāwhiao, because it talked about when he came back from the pakanga and the loss of his land. And I just want to acknowledge this area of Ngāti Wairere. Ngāti Wairere is also one of my iwi. My great-grandfather was looked after by Nana Kirimangu of Harepuke right up there. So e mihi ana ki ngā uri katoa o Ngāti Wairere. Wai hoki tēnei marae o Te Kōpū Mānia. Te Kōpū Mānia was actually the hill where we had our greatest fertile soil, and it's been cut. So that's basically what I'm standing for, the two things that no one is protecting right now, which lives out me, which outlives you as well, which is taiao and tamariki. There's going to be a lot of policies that are coming out on the cost of living. Trust me, I just want to afford my own groceries too. I have no job at the moment, so you don't get paid for this. Around cost of living, housing, the climate, the list goes on, but governments come and go, parties come and go, politicians come and go, but the things that outlive us, that aren't being protected, but the systems that I know that I can help, which is mātauranga Māori, that hasn't been taught throughout the mainstream schooling, which is actually taught by Ruruhi Koroheke and pre-Tohunga Suppression Act, is what we can implement. Another thing that I want to touch on, knowing that this is a PSA, our parents and grandparents have been union members their whole lives. What I also really want to touch on is Auntie Nanaia. What an icon. What an absolute icon for us to follow, and you're the younger generation to follow you. I just want to mihi to everyone, but really the person who's inspired me to go onto this journey, it's not an easy journey. You get some bruises and cuts, but at least I've watched my Koro take some hammers and stuff like that. But what I want to touch on is my experience through the huge gap in equity of pay. So I've never actually had a job before. Never ever had a job. I came straight from high school and I owned my own business, which is Maramataka Māori. So I published my first book, which was called Mahina. And a lot of people came straight out of kura, and I had 3 contracts that were with the government organisation: Ministry of Education, Ministry of Primary Industries, and Ministry of Social Justice, and actually Ministry of Social Development. They weren't paying me the same as what they had as the lawyer, the same as the admin, and I said, you're never going to get a rangatahi that understands tātai arorangi maramataka Māori and Marakai. I'm 1 in a million, and you pay me my $60 I'm worth. So it's not just within our public sectors, but everywhere. Your gender, your ethnicity, your age, our money needs to be at the same equity level as our value and what we bring to the table as tangata whenua, as gender, and as wahine Māori. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou.
First question, it's a generic question, and I'll ask you we'll answer it in reverse order of speaking. Like all Māori seats, this seat is a very complex seat in terms of whānau, hapu, iwi, urban Māori, orientation, a very complex seat. The question I have is given that pretext, what will you do to ensure that you represent all that live within the seat?
Well, tēnā rā tātou. I think obviously whakapapa is a huge part of this, being able to live within the grassroots of your communities and seeing it physically for yourself and actually being a part of what our rangatahi endure, something that's within our culture and within the Māori population. 70% of Māori are under the age of 40. So I already represent not just our electorate, not just our seat, but the whole table that is coming to Te Whare Parewata. Tēnā rā tātou.
That's a brilliant question. Look, I think what's really important is to understand that we're all struggling, right? We're all struggling at the supermarket, we're all struggling at the petrol station. So what Freedom NZ is going to do is they're going to reduce our GST down to 10%. The first $25,000 of our tax will not be taxed. So that's an extra $65 in our pockets. We're going to gut the puku of the bureaucracy in our country. Why? Because they're spending billions and billions of dollars on consultants, on contractors. And if you want to OIA them, if you don't know what OIA is, if you want an Official Information Act of them, you can't actually do that if they're a private company. So billions of dollars is going into that black hole, and that's called corporate welfare, right? We want to boost the living of our people by understanding that the government is there to work for us, not for the global elites. So we want to get rid of all the global influences in our country, and that's the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, the UN, because they are unelected officials acting on behalf of someone that lives outside of our country. Kia ora.
I'm just going to ditto what she said because we're actually under the same umbrella.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right, Lois.
Add anything I've missed, Kare?
Well, I might take that time then. I mean, the question is, how will we reach such a diversity of opinion and community and population demographic within Hauraki-Waikato, and that's by remaining accessible. People should feel that whether you're the local MP or a minister, that they can come up to you. And I hope that people will know that, people who know me will know that they've always been able to come and see me with their challenges. The I guess the challenge if you become an MP for this electorate is often people don't come and see you until they have a problem. And sometimes they come to you too late. So you've got to have a multi-layered approach to the way in which you work across the electorate. You have to develop relationships with organisations and constituencies that are diverse, but you fundamentally as a person have to remain accessible, and I intend to do that. Can I just answer a couple of questions while the time is truncated in one way? Firstly, we've got the Bill of Rights Act 1990, and that protects civil and political rights for all New Zealanders, and any bit of legislation that goes through Parliament has to be able to pass a BORA test, the Bill of Rights test, to protect those interests. Also, the Treaty of Waitangi standard as well. Secondly, in terms of these world forums, we're a small country in the Pacific. We need to ensure that there is an international rules-based order by which we can assure ourselves that our interests as a small country in the Pacific and in the world can be protected by these global organisations. That doesn't mean we have to accept everything that's said. We have to still engage, and we still have to ensure that our voice is heard on those many fronts. And it's really, really important. The last thing I'll say is that while I accept that there has been a strong body of opinion in relation to that period of COVID, if some of our communities didn't stand up for themselves and make a proactive decision around immunisation, our most vulnerable would have been hurt. But we have to remember, we made decisions when there was no vaccination to protect our old and our young. And I accept that there's diverse views around it and people have been hurt because of it, but we did not have the loss of life that many other countries around the world experienced because there was a carte blanche open door and actually a hands-off approach to the way in which COVID was being addressed.
Kia ora. Whānau, I've got more questions, but I'm going to open it up to the floor, please. Feel free. Tēnā koe.
Kia ora te whānau.
Kia ora.
Hey, this is probably more for Donna, Freedom, Hana. Do you agree that this current government has made some significant strides for Māori? Because I think they have.
Then you should be up here, Kare.
Well, I think that's a good question to ask all of our candidates. That's all right.
Yeah.
So, Donna, you're first, please.
For me, what's important, as I mentioned earlier, when we don't have our civil liberties, when our Bill of Rights have been encroached, and Whaia Nanaia has spoken about the Bill of Rights, but over the last 3 or 4 years, they have been taken from us. She talks about COVID-19 and her boss, because Hipkins admits that there are vaccine injuries, admits that there are deaths. So my father is part of that. So we also, as a party, my co-leader is a lawyer, and we have done an OIA. The government actually knew on the 28th of January 2021 that the vaccine was not safe and it wasn't effective. So they lied to us. They lied to us. And you need to hear that and you need to understand that, because it cost me my father's life. Why? Because the narrative that was pumped out into our community was protect your whakapapa. And that's what he did. He did it because he had so many mokopuna and so many great grand mokopuna that we buried him last year. Now, who's going to be held accountable for that, right? And let's have that debate. Let's have that serious debate, because I've been shut down, I've been silenced, I have even had, when me and my husband are on the pai and there's a political debate, they've bypassed us, and yet we're on the pai burying our whānau, right?
Kia ora, Donna.
So we're being silenced, and I'm telling you, listen, because your mokopuna and your tamariki need you to stand up and hear what I'm saying.
Kia ora, Donna.
Kia ora.
Who's next?
My question to myself for that would be, have they empowered me? Have they forced me to move in a place where I got to dream? That I got to dream that I could be whatever I wanted? Did they empower me to do that? I can't really say they did. My husband and I, we did that because of our whakapapa. I don't need a government to tell me what I can be or who I can be or what I can do. So when they didn't empower me to do that. That was my whakapapa that did that. My tūpuna came over to Aotearoa in a wooden boat, looking at the moon and the stars. That's empowering. They did that all without machines, or those little compasses that they used. You know, my tūpuna did that. That's what's empowering. They empowered me to go out there and be and become anybody that I chose to be. That's what the question I would ask. Did they empower me to do that? Or do they empower me to rely on a government funding or a government institution? Do they empower me to do that? That's what I think we should be asking.
Bringing it back to the question was, do I think that the government has made gains? I do. I absolutely do, but you would expect me to say that. But the reason why I say it with such conviction is never before have we experienced opportunities where Māori have been able to advance on their own front. The Māori Health Authority, Māori wards around councils, more Māori teachers, matariki, recognising them, matatini. I think it's really important to assure ourselves that the direction of travel continues to go forward. And as I said in my opening speech, if we have a Act-led national government enabled by New Zealand First, all that narrative will take us backwards. Lastly, on the issue of the health issues, the challenge right now for Māori and Pacific populations is that there is comorbidity aspects that impact on our health over and above having a vaccination. And I can tell you now, I grew up in a generation where you went to school and the health nurse gave you an injection and then they told the parents. And the reason why the parents accepted that is because they fundamentally wanted to do the utmost that they could to protect their whānau. Now, I don't really want to get into an anti-vax debate, but I do want to say the biggest health challenge for Māori and Pacific is the comorbidity health issues that we face and to get better equity into the system. That's so important.
Thank you very much.
Kia anō, when we go back to Uncle Moko's pātai around what have the government, you know, help Māori, I just want to kind of touch on Whaia Donna's comment around she sees Te Pāti Māori and Labour being the same thing.
Same policy.
Same policy. Well, Hannah's here now and I've got policies. So,
how's that to your boss?
We're releasing the Kaitawati policy, our call for
All due respect, no one interrupted you, Donna. Let's just carry on, please. Thank you.
Something that I want to align is that there's a difference between co-governance and self-governance. Okay, so self-governance is our tino rangatiratanga, which states that in Article 2 in Te Tiriti o Waitangi. So, you know, there's been some issues around co-governance. Wait till I come and I say, no, we are self-governed because we know how to look after our people. We know how to implement the mātauranga that we know. And with all due respect, I understand that government has implemented those different kaupapa, but it wasn't the government who did that, it was our tūpuna. We implemented matariki, we implemented te reo Māori, and the policies within Te Pāti Māori is actually the protesters that don't have to come yet. So kai sovereignty policy that I'm releasing tomorrow in my Māra Kai, yes, we're taking 15% GST off all foods, which will save you $3,500 worth of money for the whole year, and the longevity of that is returning us to ourselves, original navigators of the world. Just like what our whānau have said, don't use the app, be the app. That is our self-governance around tino rangatiratanga. No matter what happens, tino rangatiratanga lives outside of the walls of Parliament, and we know the systems that we need to do to look after ourselves. Kia ora.
I have a question. It's a generic question. I think it's one of the fundamental issues that we are confronted with, and just as importantly or more sadly so, our mokopuna will be confronted with, and that is the climate crisis that we're currently living in and the disproportionate effect that it has on Te Māori. So that's the context of the question. Can you please express your personal and party's perspective in terms of how we are going to address the climate crisis. Kia ora, Lois.
They brought these electric cars over and they gave it a green tick. They said they're green. Well, someone's whenua was getting destroyed in the process of the making of it. But because we took it off our shores and moved it over there, and then we bring it back and go tick, I kind of call BS when it comes to this climate crisis. Because I look outside and our grass is green. Our trees are still growing. Our taiao looks great. What happened to that? And yet they sold an idea. My in-laws, Atuke Lowen, in the 1980s, they sold them an idea. Your island's going under the water. We're in 2023 now, the island's still there. 1980, you told them they're going to be flooded. You need to get off the land. 2023, it's still there. So I kind of call BS, if I'm allowed to say that, on climate change. I kind of do. That's my thoughts, that's my opinions. Go out and do your research. Just because they've put an idea out there doesn't make it truthful. We just have to look outside. We know something's going on, but it's not the idea they've sold. That's just my thing. What are we going to do about it? Go back to the whenua and start doing all of that stuff. We know what we're doing as Māori. Again, our tupuna came in their wooden boats looking at the moon and the stars. Let's go back to that.
Okay. Donna?
Oh, no,
Sorry, Nanaia. Sorry.
Look, on climate change, having travelled the world and especially amongst the Pacific has identified climate change as their existential challenge, and they have challenged the global community to act collectively to keep global warming at 1.5 degrees. And what that means is that as each country adopts that challenge, we have to take positive actions in order to achieve that. So it's not going to be easy, but what have we done? We've identified that moving to a low carbon economy is essential. We've drawn a line in terms of offshore mining, and that we don't want to give new consents around that. That means in Taranaki especially, we've got to work with that region in order to transition their economy, which has been gas and oil reliant, towards a low carbon economy. They are leading the charge in terms of our country approach to some extent. And also moving to low emission vehicles. Transport emissions alongside agricultural emissions are the biggest emissions. So at a national level, that's it. But there's a lot more that we could do locally to assure ourselves that the little things that we're doing are making a difference. We are over-consuming. So the kaupapa around food sovereignty, food security, energy, renewable energy investment are all going to help in our local steps. And we have invested in those types of things to ensure that New Zealand can stand up to its international obligation and hold integrity with our domestic response.
This is a great question. Have any of you heard of Ian Wishart? He's an investigative journalist. If you haven't, I suggest you go and look him up. He's written 2 reports called Climate Fear and one called Totalitaria. Now, what's important about what he's highlighting is that there are different science out there. There's the narrative that the government supports, and NIWA, which is the government's research unit, are pushing the climate change narrative. Now, NIWA has left out 80% of the data, and it's only taken the data from 1991 to today that says we're in a climate crisis. He went all the way back to 1840 that says that actually what's been happening over the last few years is actually less than what was happening over 100 years ago. So think about it. We got tricked with the pandemic. Now we're getting tricked again. I'm not saying that there are no climate issues. I'm not saying that Papatūānuku is not being polluted and our waterways, our wai's not being polluted, because they are. They are. So we've had 2 governments, the blue and the red, that have been in power for 88 years. Why haven't they sorted it out? Why haven't they stopped the pollutants going into our waterways, the hazardous toxins going into our waterways? No, they haven't. So we need to put a stop to that. And like I say, we've only got a short period of time, but I've given you some indicators for research. Go and do your own research and then come back and have a kōrero, because I can talk to the cows come home about this taki. Kia ora.
Tēnā rā tātou. Well, I've literally can kōrero about climate till the cows come home, and I will. Something that I've really pushed out in the media is that it's not climate change, it's human change. And when we look at our awa, we know that moana tui te repo, which is our wetlands, which is our mangroves, which is our that is the natural lungs of our papatuanaku, 97% of it gone. So when we have floods and on our wetlands, we've done it to ourselves. We have literally scarred our papatuanuku, and then we blame, the places that we've put infrastructure, and roads are literally prisons. You put a prison on a geothermal tupuna and up in the Northland. I mean, there's just so many things that my own data through Maramataka, through Tātai Arorangi, through Marakai, that we have seen. And I'd really like to push something, since everyone's putting in their little social medias. If you go follow Mahina, Mahina, you will see through 3 years working with Ministry of Primary Industries, we have actually had the return in a small plot of land here in Waikato, the return of the matuku bird, the return of the kingfisher bird, and the return of the green frogs, which indicates that our water is healthy since me growing my tupuna kai of kumara.
Take a question from the whānau, please. Do we have a question, whānau?
I forgot it. A question? Sure. So mine's to do with water.
Yes.
From the Tikuriho. What would you, can someone talk to how the councils are giving consent to the Chinese for draining our whenua of our water and bottling them and selling them? Can someone talk to that?
Can I
what that looks like?
Can I rephrase your question?
Yes.
Your fundamental question is selling off water to foreign entities. Okay. Nanaia?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a live case in Whakatane with O Taikiri, where the consenting of water for to increase the water bottling there has been a live issue. The challenge there was contested within the people of Ngāti Awa and that community. It is a consenting issue. If you're saying that, if you're asking what is our policy on the commercialisation of water for offshore selling, we're worried about that. And in the same vein, we actually want to see te mana o te wai included in the way in which water service delivery occurs, and that's how it's being led through councils. That's why we have a recognition of te mana o te wai across legislation that impacts on council decision making, and it will lead eventually to improved catchment outcomes. Now, government can't do it by themselves, neither can councils. They have to work with local community and especially iwi in order to achieve those objectives. And what that hopefully will mean over the long term is we're talking about water security, the more efficient use of water, the health of water, and its sustainable use and well-being.
Kia ora. Donna?
Another good question. I think what we need to understand is what's actually happening at a government level. So we're seeing the water reforms that hugely impact on our people. And Nanaia was the Minister for Local Government at the time that were allowing the police, giving police more powers to have warrantless searches on our marae in regards to being the output of that water reform. That's a concern, isn't it? Because our marae was our last bastion, right? When you empower the police to come on with and that actually started from the COVID-19 Public Health Response Act. And I have to remind you, I can hear Nanaia sighing there, but she was part of the government. She has to take responsibility for a lot of those acts that come through government. Now's the time to be accountable. I am standing up for the future of my mokopuna, and I want Nanaia to stand up for the future of our mokopuna, and yet, what, is that right when we've seen our Bill of Rights go? Really, seriously? Is that right when her government has allowed police to come onto our marae without a warrant? Are we happy with that? Are we happy with that? Come on, whānau. Kia ora.
Just tai hoa. I'm going to let Hana have her kōrero, and I am going to give Nanaia the right of reply simply because she has been named. I have asked us, whānau, let's talk about general policy.
Well, she was minister. Hang on a minute. She was minister of local government. I have the right to ask her as the minister sitting beside me. Absolutely.
And she will have the right of reply. Ka pai. And that's what I'm facilitating.
Ka pai.
Kia ora, Hana.
Kia ora. I think as a job, it is also for me to make sure that I protect my whakapapa and make sure that I would like to say, I don't know how you guys bloody do it.
We have to, that's why.
Kia ora, Donna. Kia ora.
Will you ask the question?
Hoi. What I would like to say, if we look at the Three Waters when it was actually a good one, when Auntie Nanaia was doing it, the simplified version was clean drinking water for everyone, every day. So the distribution and inputs of stormwater, wastewater and drinking water. That's just the simplified version of it, okay? As a rangatahi, sometimes we have no idea what's going on, but it's my job to make sure we're translating for the rangatahi in the room what that actually means in its original form of Three Waters. And that's what I want to say. I also want to touch on the incoming, the incoming of, I'm really worried about our water. I know there hasn't been enough research on it, but I have to say it now. And the water that's been the Pacific Ocean and the Fukushima, that is a big, huge concern on a global level.
Thank you, Anna.
That is the biggest ocean that our tupuna have navigated, and they've put toxic waste into our original homelands of tangata moana. So water on a larger global scale and local level. Also a good, real good, just one more, a real good,
You're getting used to this.
a real good product or prototype to system that's really amazing is through Tūhoi, where they actually self-govern through council on their own waters, where they don't actually have a council, but it's actually their iwi looking after their waterways, and that it's very healthy. So kia ora whānau.
So, whānau, because Nanaia was specifically mentioned and challenged, I'm going to give her the right of reply. I will ask our candidates if they can address the general issue. I would appreciate it. Kia ora, Nanaia.
Kia ora, and I'll answer the question on the two fronts. Firstly, with COVID, and during that period of time, you'll recognise or remember that special legislation was put into place to create the lockdowns, but also that impacted on people's kind of mobility and things like that. And that did have an impact. And when we look back at that time, we think, yeah, we've learned a lot from that. But that was at a time when there was no vaccination. But going to the point around entry onto marae, at the time, there was an inclusion for marae. But before the legislation got passed, it was raised by a number of communities, Māori, as well as the police, who said it was inconsistent with existing law, so we took it out. So I don't want you to think that there was no change to what was originally put in to what eventually emerged. And that's how legislation works. We actually get pulled up a lot of the times, wouldn't matter who the government is, about how to improve legislation. And if you're listening to your communities who are inputting into legislation. That's how it works. So that was taken out and it wasn't followed through there. On water, I can say categorically, because I designed the legislation, that the same preservation of marae interests exists. And I say it in front of our marae trustee chairperson, who would hit the roof if he knew that the police or anyone else could come into our marae carte blanche without the consent of our marae trustee or our marae committee. That does not exist in the water services legislation.
Thank you, Nanaia. Thank you for the allowing Nanaia to have the right of reply. Thank you, Donna. Whānau, question please. Kia ora, whānau.
Oh, kia ora. A short statement this morning when I was driving here on national program, there was an interview of a guy that used to run the oversee Montana. And what he was saying there was that there's most of our primary businesses are now owned offshore. That has an impact on us as Māori. It has an impact on New Zealand as a whole, and that was the thing that he was emphasising. So from a Māori perspective, how do we overcome the sell-off of our primary industries? And I'm talking about in the private sector. Yeah. And as politicians, what does that mean to you? For the Te Pāti Māori, I know where we stand on that, but just in general.
That's a very good question. Thank you for that, Whaia. And Donna?
Excellent question, Whaia. In regards to Freedom NZ, we want to take foreign ownership out of the equation. We want Kiwi land in Kiwi hands, period. We also want to take the unruly legislation that we've now got out there currently within the regulations that are going to bog and overwhelm our farmers. Now, we are all beneficiaries of a lot of farms in regards to the whenua that we have. And so that means that our farms are going to be bogged down with unworkable legislation which will force our farmers off the land. Now, how do you get thriving communities? You get thriving communities through good kai, right? If we force our farmers, whether they're sheep farmers or whether they're horticultural farmers, agricultural farmers, off our farm because of unworkable legislation, then we are in trouble, because our farms feed 14 million globally, including ourselves. So we need to get back to the basics, and we need to heed what is actually happening in government through regulations, through policies, and it's unworkable. We've got to get rid of the red tape. Kia ora.
Whānau, candidates. Some of our people have travelled a long way to be here. They're taking their time off work. Some people had to take unpaid leave. Can I please ask you to be respectful of the questionnaires and answer the question? Kia ora, Hana.
Sorry, Shane, from Hana's, Montana was a wine industry.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. No, we got your question. Your question is in respect to overseas ownership, and I want to ensure as the moderator that people are answering your question.
Thank you.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Well, I'll have to do more research on the specific question around Montana. However, I know with the Kai sovereignty policy that's releasing tomorrow that I'm in charge of, that I've done, and I'm pretty proud of it. However, the whole purpose of it is to protect our whakapapa through seeds, to protect our whakapapa through the kai that we know, through horticulturing, through mara kai, through fishing, through hunting, through gathering, because unfortunately, yes, 90% of our meat is exported, 95% of our milk and dairy is exported, and we can't even afford it in the original place that it's made here in Aotearoa. So it's about returning back to what I know that we can do, is looking after our kai sovereignty through the policy that's being released tomorrow.
Ka pai.
Hana?
I think the first point is foreign investment is different to foreign ownership. And what we've done since being in government is we have tightened the rules over there around the Overseas Investment Commission to limit the way in which foreign ownership exists. And clearly on the issue of housing, there is a departure between us and the National Party. The National Party want to open up the door to foreign ownership, which will inflate the housing market, and they haven't ruled out the potential of that extending to land. And that's where the rub is, that's where the stark difference is. But if you talk about offshoring manufacturing of private companies, often the government can't do too much around that except to find out how, if they offshored manufacturing, like Fonterra, for example, having a milk factory in Malaysia, how they retain their interests back in New Zealand and bring the returns of offshore manufacturing back to New Zealand. And that's what we try and assure ourselves when we agree to free trade agreements that work in our interests. Because it's okay if our biggest companies want to do that, or if in the growing tech sector they want to offshore manufacturing of certain aspects so that they add value to their business and what they're producing, but it's almost all of that comes back to New Zealand. And that's the kind of economic cycle that works in our interests. And it's very different to, I think, what you're indicating, that they take all those interests all together offshore. And we wouldn't kind of support that. We'd support a circular opportunity to bring the value back to Aotearoa New Zealand.
Kia ora, Nanaia. Thank you. Thank you.
Supplementary to that.
Okay then.
Because it comes into data sovereignty,
Okay.
Māori data sovereignty.
Okay. So what is your policy, or what is your position, or how do you? How do
Can you put that into a part?
Oh no, I think we understand it. How do we ensure that our data sovereignty is kept? That's a very good and very relevant question.
Maybe
I think we had Hana
kick
first, and we're going to go around this way. Thank you, Hana.
We're actually releasing a data sovereignty policy too. When you look at the United Nations Indigenous policy that's been released, it's all about control, manage and protect. Those are the best things that we can do for the future, even though we've got different, I think what we have to be very, very careful of, even though it's an evolving business, but also having policies that can protect us at the same time, is artificial intelligence and how we move and adapt as a Māori iwi, as an Indigenous culture, moving forward with AI and data sovereignty. And if we look at that legislation around control, manage and protect, also the legislation, the Y claim of Y262, it is everything and anything, the tangible and the intangible things, ngā matakitia, ngā matangaro, ngā taonga tuku iho, tātou tūpuna, I roto I te krene o Y262.
If I follow from that, and I just want to mihi to Hana for the mahi that she's been doing with the Y262 claimant group, because that will establish the framework by which New Zealand could have greater integrity in protecting Indigenous intellectual property, extending to data, extending to taonga species, extending to taonga works, and the way in which we present ourselves in the international domain. I lead that work program, but it's owned by Māori, for Māori. So I think what you might want to look at coming out of that body of thinking is how iwi-led solutions are crafting and advising the way in which current and future governments should think about the framework or the legislative template to be able to be more enabling in favour of Indigenous interests.
Lois? That's Lois and then
Oh, okay, sorry.
I've got nothing to speak to it. I'm going to go back and do some research and learn on this stuff.
Thank you, Lois. Kia ora, Donna.
Okay, another good question. So in June 2020, the World Economic Forum put out a white paper. So a white paper is a discussion document talking about the very thing, artificial intelligence, and how they were using New Zealand as the pilot program for artificial intelligence. In July 2020, Labour Party, everything, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a dangerous track for Labour Party to take us down. Why? You're talking about data sovereignty. When you have a framework, a legislative framework that allows the collection of all our data And then you also have what they want, a white paper come out from the Reserve Bank in 2021 to digitalise our currency. That's called social credit. Now, China is running a social credit system right now. And the social credit system, once you've got your digital identity and your data and your currency comes together, they have what you call a reward and punishment system. That is purely about control. That is about governments around the world and the global elites being able, setting up the tools to be able to control our lives. And if you challenge what's happening, the narrative, rather than just getting cancelled, they shut down your bank account. That's what we are heading towards. Okay. So think about that. It's already in legislation. This is not a conspiracy. The policy and the legislation, don't laugh, Joe, because the legislation is there. You do not have a legal background. I do.
Donna,
and the legislation is there. And the policies are there. Do not cancel me, because this is my opportunity. This is what a politician does, right? Mm-hmm. A politician stands up for what they believe in. And we hear about protecting your whakapapa. I'm here because I'm standing up for my mokopuna, for your mokopuna. Yes, I absolutely am.
Can I
No, you can't deny it. All due respect. I just want, please, let's not get into finger pointing and pulling out.
We're in an election. We're in an election.
No, Donna. Either I'm going to moderate this or I'm not. All I'm just asking whānau is not to get into a one-on-one battle or whatever with our people that are here in their own time to be at this debate. So we'll just be respectful of that. I've got a question.
Can I respect that, but can I fact check? Because at the end of the day, I'm the current MP, and people will expect me to fact check any accusation made against the government.
I'll give you that opportunity, but please be brief.
I will be brief.
Okay.
The Department of Statistics and the Department of Internal Affairs are the first departments to enter into a mana orite agreement with iwi Māori based on a data sovereignty set of arrangements.
Okay. Right, I've got a question. Plenty of time. The question is, and it's very timely, because it's an issue that was raised by Whanonga from Ngāti Wai, Winston Peters, when he said, we are not Indigenous, we are not tangata whenua. Your reply, Lois, let's go around this way. Lois,
Stir the pot, Uncle Winston, eh? It's my whakapapa. It's in my DNA, my tupuna told me so. That's all you need to know. Like, he can stir the pot all he wants, but we all just stirring the pot. Fluffing feathers.
I'm disappointed with the statement, and I believe that it does Māori a huge disservice, and I say that on my mother's Ngāpuhi side to Uncle Winston. But the reason why I'm saying that there is such a stark difference at this next election is we will not, Labour will not run with the wolves and hunt with the hounds for any vote and say anything at the expense of Māori. Māori have had enough of being a political football, and there is so much at stake, and we have to detach ourselves from anything that will take us backwards. And that statement, in my mind, was hugely disappointing.
I just think that's a koretake, uncle, right? Hey, e kira. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Donna.
Yeah, I think this is a huge reason why rangatahi get turned off. Is it's just a whole, and I get it, politics is a dirty game. I've watched my grandparents do the strongest politics, the one outside of Parliament. However, this is why we get turned off, is because there's a lack of translation. It's almost like you're not wanting us to get involved because there's no translation, there's no relevance, there's nothing, and then all we see is Winston, the koro who needs to get out in terms of belittling our mana as tangata whenua. We are tangata whenua, we are tangata moana, and it's in the whakapapa of our kumara. It's come all the way back through centuries, and yeah, I think also through David Seymour saying he Māori ahau, there's multiple comments that have been said, but we are watching. The young people are watching, and this has to stop.
Kia ora.
Kia koutou katoa, Rawi Pokero. I need to stand in the corridor. I have got a couple of comments to make before my question.
Okay.
But I want to lead to the PSA in the first instance. My 60 kaimai are going to be very pleased with their pay increase. So we at the Kia koutou, let's work together on supporting them. So, you know, at the tuatai, I want to inform the Crown Government parties that we are Waikato are standing on our own mana mo te hake. And I'm leading to my question. I wish you all were on the right side at the moment. Ne? I think we all need to come together as TV Māori. Ne? There's only two parties in this country, or one. We can go back to the one if you want to, or you got to fulfill Te Treaty or Waitangi. No use talking about it if we actually not going to fulfill it. So that's one of my pātai. Do you understand Te Treaty or Waitangi? I wish the national guys were here and the other people. And how are you going to fulfill it? How are you going to fulfill the articles of the treaty? Because at the moment, as far as I'm concerned, it's null and void. Ne? So I hope you understand my question.
No, I think it's a perfectly
Yeah.
Kia ora. I think it's a perfectly understandable question. I think it's a very important question. So I'm going to double the time for people to answer because I think it's a very important question. And Nanaia next, and then we'll go this way.
Yeah. Look, thank you for the question, and I think that we've made huge gains in terms of giving effect to the treaty and partnership since we've been government. And I've been in two different hues of a red government, but what I have recognised is that embedded in an approach, and this is on the government side, they're more willing to accept that Māori are a part of the solution and need to drive some of the solutions. And in that respect, sometimes government needs to just move to the side. So I go back to what I said, we are more in the frame of whānau-centred, locally led, government enabled. And that has evolved within the Labour Party over a period of time. We recognise that as a Labour Party, we don't get everything right, but we are more embracing of the approach where iwi Māori are core to a solution. COVID showed that. Responding to natural disasters showed that. Actually addressing climate change showed that. And reversing the negative statistics in health and education has shown that. But I can tell you now that an ACT-led national government enabled by New Zealand First will remove a lot of that. That is the cancel culture that we cannot have embed in this next election. That is why Māori are critical, young people are critical to the outcome of this next election. We have to motivate our whānau, the workers, the most vulnerable, the youth, the women, and Māori and Pacific to say these choices are so stark. If we want a treaty oriented future, it's clear in my mind. Now, if anyone else is saying that the other lot are going to do even better than what the progress that we've made over these last 6 years, they better say it, but I wouldn't waste my vote either. That's the other thing, because there are a lot of people saying a lot of things around single issues, and I just wouldn't waste my vote. I'd be very clear about what the direction of travel we need our country to go in.
I just want to know where Labour think that there's a treaty or te tiriti relationship when they're putting regulators in, so they're usurping. Regulators are usurping our local government processes by allowing one person who's unelected, who we can't kick out in the next election, to start making decisions for us. Where does te tiriti sit with a regulator? If we look at the Therapeutics Product Act, there's a regulator in that act. When we look at social media and taking away free speech, there's a regulator in that legislation as well. So I actually want to know from Labour, where does te tiriti sit when you're actually taking away the sovereign of all New Zealanders? Kia ora.
No, I'm not going to ask you to respond to that. And Donna, I've given you the time to answer the question. You chose not to answer the question.
I did answer the question.
No, you didn't.
I asked where does te tiriti sit with a regulator? That's a legitimate question for a politician to ask.
No, and then you went on. So, kia ora Hana.
Kia ora whānau. So when we bring it back and simplify it for Te Pāti Māori's standpoint on Te Tiriti, when the Tiriti was brought here, in Article 2, it says that Queen Wikitoria, Queen Irihāpiti, whoever's in the monarchy can govern their people, but they cannot govern us. And that's why we are moving towards a Māori parliament where we are self-governed. That is our tino rangatiratanga. And I accept that co-governance looks like co-governing on issues that relate to all of us as citizens of Aotearoa. However, we have to come up and clean up the shit that they messed up for us, and our climate, and our money, and our groceries, and everything. And that's why we believe in tino rangatiratanga and te tiriti. That's what it clearly states. She needs to look after her people, and we will look after our people. Kia ora mai tātou.
I'm going to be honest, I was raised as a colonialised Māori. So when it comes to te reti, my ignorance will probably show. But I know that Pākehā Māori coming together, that can only be a good thing. Can only be a good thing. I'm still trying to figure out what good they brought, but we'll get there. But here, we're here together. Because the reality is my mum and her siblings are still they're full-blooded, but it stops with them. Because I've got Irish Scots and this German guy pops in somewhere in our whakapapa and disappears. But that's my reality. My tamariki a Tukeloan, my grandnephew is Indian. So we're multicultural family. So when it comes to te reti, that should include them too. Because we're all here. But I guess the biggest issue is how do we do this with each other's strengths? I guess we've got to let go of our pride and our ego and our hurts of the past. We've recognised it, but where to from now? I guess that for me is my question. How do we move forward together? Where we're strengthening each other and empowering each other, because that's my whakapapa. We're talking about my future generation. So that's what me with te tiriti. Please come correct me, and if I need to be corrected, I asked you to do that. So yeah, I'm just being honest.
Kia ora. Kia ora. Ngā mihi tina.
Just a question. Do you support UNDRIP, and how would you bring that into New Zealand legislation?
Sorry, I didn't quite get that. Do you support?
United Nations Declaration of Indigenous People.
Right. United Nations Declaration of Independence. Do you support it? And the pro forma question is, if you do, how would you implement it? I think we're with you first, Donna.
Well, I just want to say that localism is really important to our party. We want to get foreign influence out of our country and allow our country to be run by ordinary New Zealanders rather than those that have other hidden agendas. So this to me is about localism versus multinationals versus corporations versus unelected globalists. So what you're asking me is, do I put globalists before our local communities? No, I don't. I put local communities before our globalists. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora, Hana.
I'll have to do some more research on UNDRIP before I comment on it.
Lois?
Yeah, I've got to research that one.
Nanaia.
My memory goes way back. If I go back to the 5th Labour government, Labour at the time didn't sign UNDRIP in the international fora on the basis that if it signed up to an agreement that it couldn't assure itself that it could have domestically congruent laws, then it would kind of be like a bit of a, a lip service kind of move. That said, the Peter Sharples and John Key went over to the UN and signed up to UNDRIP, but then left it at that over the 8 or so years that they were in government. When we got into government again in 2017, we took what we had on behalf of where the country was at and said, okay, how might you progress UNDRIP? And that is the steps that were taken to try and put back to iwi Māori, come up with a national action plan that might give some practical and tangible steps to take an Indigenous set of agreed principles forward. That has since been put to the side because there are political parties, interestingly enough, like National and ACT and New Zealand First, who do not want to see that National Plan of Action advance. Right now, this government is in conversation with the Iwi Chairs Forum, who are advancing their aspirations around UNDRIP, but it's very much in a conversation space. So that's a long answer, but that is the state of play of where things are at.
Thank you, Lana. I have a question, and also happy to take other questions. I think we're on the home stretch. Maybe another question from the floor, but I just want to ask a question first, and then we'll give our candidates the opportunity to summarise. There's been a movement amongst young people to lower the voting age to 16 plus, installed at local body elections. Would you support the 16 plus movement towards universal suffrage if you are elected? And I think it's your turn first, Hana.
The first step would be voting for rangatahi, so that would be the first step. However, we've worked closely alongside the Make It 16 campaign alongside Caden, and I am a complete support, so as Te Pāti Māori, of this campaign. When you look at it, 16-year-olds are allowed to get their driver's licence, they're allowed to leave school, they're allowed to have sex, they're allowed to do a lot of things that you can do as an adult. So I think their vote is very, very crucial in our government. However, I also would really like to acknowledge that Kirikiriroa is the youngest population in Aotearoa, with 49.8% of the youth here in Aotearoa and Kirikiriroa. So that would look very, very good for our electorate of Waikato Hauraki as well.
That's a great question. I think firstly we need civic education in our schools, and that's so that our rangatahi actually know what it means to vote and they understand about policy. Because a lot of, sometimes elections are about personality rather than policy. I have a legal policy background, that's why I'm pretty staunch on legislation and policies. So civic education, not just for our rangatahi, but for all our whānau is important. But I also tautoko the whakamana of our rangatahi, so I tautoko that policy.
As a short answer, it's yes. As a māma, my answer is yes. And as a māma who makes it my business to ensure that my children, critically test and assess the things that they hear so that they're not just letting anything into their head, yes. And I believe that if, as parents, we are robust in the way that we raise our children to think about why they believe what they believe, why they're taking things forward, then we will only ever have great leaders that are well informed, that know what they stand for, that are determined, and they have the courage of their convictions to move forward.
I've got a 28-year-old, and he said, "Mum, I'm going to vote for the internet party." I said, "What?" I said, "So what are they going to do for you?" So he goes, "They're going to give me free internet." He's 28. Here's my point. Yeah, as Nanaia has said, we have to educate as parents our tamariki in comprehending and understanding that their vote actually counts. It is 50% you like the person, but what about the policies? And so we've been able to sit and educate our boys in what it means in politics and what that means for us as a country. Not just as all peoples for our tamariki. So yeah, but we have to get savvy as parents. We educate them about everything else. Well, why not politics? It'd be nice to see it in the kura, and be taught as a class. Maybe they can comprehend it from them, but it'll just help the process. So yeah, yes.
Thank you. we have any questions or more questions, whānau?
I do.
Well, there's a couple. I'll take you first, brother, and then I'll take you.
Basically, a question. I won't shape the question up, but there's two cultures that I'm interested in when it comes to the legally identified population group of Aotearoa called Māori. One culture has something to do with the people that engage in culture or identify with traditional First Peoples culture, and the other one is the sort of impoverished both culturally and economically. Those two cultures are very, very different peoples with very, very different sets of needs. What are we doing in the political space to bring awareness to the diverse needs, very diverse needs? So
Within Māori.
bringing attention to the culture isn't necessarily going to meet the needs of the impoverished or the poor health states. And so, whilst identifying that, what are we doing? What's on top for our parties in terms of thinking about those two groups of people?
I think that's a wonderfully framed kōrero.
May I interrupt because mine was exactly in line with what this gentleman was going to talk about, because and that will cut me from being able to talk. I'm super passionate about whānau well-being, and I've stood here listening to each and every one of you from of course answering these questions, but the underlying kaupapa that all of us have really come here for is what is each of your parties' way forward to our whānau, because we've got we're seeing on the news, etc., even last night on my own street, cars being burgled, crime rates going up. I know a certain demographic that where there are 14 pink houses in a small town, and it has now become the hub for gang members to meet, to distribute their drugs. I also know of areas where crime rates are up, that these thugs are allowed to just roll and do their thing in these neighbourhoods.
All due respect, I don't think your question was in the same context. I think you're asking this more specific. If I'm right about crime and punishment, so I want to go back to your question, please, Matua. Can we answer that? And that is, how do we balance Māori economic and cultural needs?
Well, there's two definitions there.
Yes.
The legal definition and the cultural one.
Okay, cool. Yep, I get it. Okay, Lois?
What it means to be Māori.
Lois?
Oh, no, good.
Okay.
I can speak to that one.
We'll come to that in a minute. Yes. Donna?
What it means to be Māori, in my mahi, I developed cultural impact assessment reports, and I brought that in several years ago when I was, because I have a resource management background, and it's looking at certain activities that impact on papatūānuku. And as whānau do, they take you through the justice system. So I brought that cultural impact assessment into the justice system to identify over generations and through colonisation the impacts that have had on our people. And when we're talking about the diversity, there are our young ones. Again, I also fought at the kohanga level for the speakers now, because I was second generation that missed out on the reo. And so I fought hard so that my tamariki wouldn't miss out on the reo. But we all have whānau, we all know the negative statistics, so I don't have to share that. The question is while we're impoverished, we become culturally impoverished as well because we're too busy trying to survive. And that's what my cultural impact assessments have identified. I use the whare tapa whā, and so when one's out of whack, then the person's out of whack. You've got to find that balance, and we're still trying to get there. This is intergenerational, and I don't know how long it's going to take for us to get out of there. I can only say that Freedom NZ is about supporting whānau first, and is about turning our criminal whānau, our gangster whānau into fathers and into men, that they can then be a good role model. And so Man Up is what we've promoted for Freedom NZ. And so that's our answer. And it's very successful because, $30.5 million correction has had to look at programs within our justice system, within our prisons, and it's not worked. Man Up has not received 1 cent from the government, and yet it's working. And we all know whānau that have come through Man Up. Kia ora.
Kia ora whānau. Well, I'd just like to say it's Pāti Māori creating this whare parimata, everyone is welcome. Tangata tiriti mai, tangata moana mai, tangata, we are all people, right? Yeah. But from personal experience, I would like to share a story of how my schooling system and the different schoolings that I've been in. So I've been in mainstream, bilingual and full immersion. I've been through the 3 different systems that our Aotearoa has. And I will say it is very, very hard, this is just through personal experience, for a rangatahi Māori to be in the mainstream curriculum because they don't understand our generational trauma. And we are too busy trying to survive. We went to Huinga Taura with all the universities that had the Māori groups in Christchurch last week, and they said the biggest need they need is mental health. They need Māori counsellors, Māori practitioners that can help us who aren't actually connected or as culturally connected as they would like to be. Another personal experience, because I've heard some kōrero around framing our gang whānau and our whānau who are struggling within poverty aren't actually connected culturally. For the people that I live in Huntly, and I know that I train with the blues, with the reds, with the hucks, the other ones who've given us our sandwiches in schooling lives before government did. And no matter what, when we come into this training, when we're fighting, we are all one people, no matter what, and that's a whānau-based approach. And I'd also like to acknowledge the Man Up, because we've got whānau in there as well. But it's whatever you can do with outside of government that can help our whānau connect. And I also think Mahina is a great way of connecting us, whare tapa whā, through mental health space. Kia ora.
Yeah, thank you for the question, because it's actually the hardest challenge to respond to. And if we were really serious about the approach, much of the response does not sit with government, which is why a government-enabled response to actually deal with the root cause is such a necessary kind of environment to be in. Because if we think of the underlying issues, it's often poverty, it's disconnection, dislocation from a sense of belonging. Now, I don't have any of the answers for the things I think you're wanting to search from us, but are you saying, if you're asking me, do I believe, hand on heart, and I live in this, we live in the same communities, but, hand on, for the party, well, I could go through the pipeline. We're trying to reverse a justice system that previously would lock them up and throw away the key. And I say them because that's the mentality of that kind of approach. We don't want that, because we know that leads to intergenerational harm and systemic deprivation. But you can see that the challenge that we've had to try and combat a view that wants to lock them up and throw away the key. And we say, no, we have to work with our whānau, we have to look for reducing recidivism, we have to ensure that those solutions are supported within a community setting. Then there's the education system. We need our kids to feel like they belong in education. Actually, not that they're not misfits. So whatever we have to do across the whole of the education kind of offering to make it more able to work with our tamariki, and our students will do that. The other thing is our young people learn differently. So earning while you learn provides another way to get out of poverty. So, there's not one answer. And I think you've asked the most important question, but it's not an easy set of solutions. And I truly believe, again, I come back to whānau-centred, locally led, government enabled on these issues because they require a very connected set of responses to get the best outcome for our whānau.
Lois does want to go. Kia ora, Lois. Thank you, Nana. Kia ora, Lois.
Speak to the trauma of the person. Help heal the trauma of the person. And then you'll begin to see the seed that's already in them begin to grow. Because until the trauma is dealt with, instead of putting a plaster on it, like we're talking about all our gangs and that. My father was in the Huhu Grubs in Tukoroa in the Forest Creek gangs. The Huhu Grubs, that's what, he was in that. I'm not sure about that whole story because we moved here to Waikato, us three younger siblings. But for vision, you heal the trauma of the person, not another tick a box thing, because we're people. We got emotions and we have feelings, and actually we have memory, and that memory gets passed down through generations. And the only way that we can help to deal with that is to heal the trauma. That's a hard thing to do, especially for Māori when we're quite proud people. We don't talk about that stuff. We need to. We need to, as a people, start talking about our injustices and our traumas and our hurts. I never grew up on the marae. I now know why, because Mum and Dad protected us from stuff that happened on the marae. When we start getting honest with ourselves, whānau, then we can begin to heal. Because until we heal, all we're doing is putting a plaster on something that needs to be fixed. Because policies and all these different things isn't going to fix our emotions or our memory of what's happened past. That stuff. Man up. Legacy. We do that. Vision promotes that. It's been tried, tested and proven for the last 13 years. Because this isn't about who holds the mana. This is about helping to heal our people so that we can empower them and help them to dream again. To dream again.
Kia ora. Well, whānau, we've had plenty of opportunities to ask questions.
I said to Aotearoa, are you ready? For a whole year, people have said, we are ready, Hana. We are ready. Our rangatahi are ready. Our people are ready. They are ready for change and they're ready for us. Today, I would like to end the question by asking our pai, are you coming with us? Because we are ready to go and our waka is moving. There are anchors in this waka that are stopping our people. The success is successioning. We are successioning in our kura, we are successioning in our pai, we are successioning in our clubs, we are successioning in our sports, but we aren't successioning here in this place. We are all about building a table, not a seat. I'm not here to fight over a seat. I'm here to build a table. Here and never again. H-A-N-A. E kore tēnei whakaoranga e huri ki tua o oku mokotunga. Tēnā rā tātou katoa.
Kia ora mai tātou. I just would like to tautoko what Hana says. You know, we've got the future of Māoridom sitting right on the seat. We've had 30 years of a legacy with Whaia Nanaia, and then we have the Freedom NZ. Now, as you can hear, we've heard today about protecting whakapapa. Well, I'm standing here because I want to protect my whakapapa and I want to protect their future. I have put out some real challenging whakaaro, and I hope I've challenged you. I really do, because we've come through challenging times and there's a lot that's happened during those challenging times. As I've said, we've seen the encroachment and the breaching of our Bill of Rights and our human rights. If we want Māori rights, we have to ensure that our Bill of Rights and our human rights are entrenched That's really important. I think what else is important is that we understand that Māori, I believe that Te Pāti Māori and Labour are very close in their policies, and that's kei te pai tērā, right? That's okay. I am saying I am your opposition, because we need opposition in Parliament. We need someone that's going to challenge some of the narratives, some of the rhetoric, some of the policies, some of the legislation that's happening down there, and be able to translate that to you. Because it's the translation of those policies, it's the translations of those legislation that's getting missed out, that's getting lost. So it's important to have someone in Parliament that can actually do that for our people. So what I am saying, please, if you want to give your candidate vote to Nanaia or to our kōrero Hana, please do that. But if you, Hana, sorry, please do that. But if you want someone that's going to challenge government, no matter who the government is, whether it's blue or whether it's red, party vote Freedom NZ. Kia ora.
I try not to make promises I can't keep, and so I only speak to what I know, and if I don't know, I'll go find out. Why should you vote for vision? I think it was Tawhio that said that people without a vision perish. He went into the Paipera Tapu and took that proverb, because people without a vision perish. Because if you're not aiming for something, then where are you going? You're lost. Well, we're not a lost nation, we're actually a thriving nation. That's what my eyes see anyway, regardless of the chaos that's happening. We're a resilient people. We are a resilient people, and we'll get knocked down and we'll get back up again. And you know, the beauty of our people that I see is we're strengthened all the more for it. We're a fighting people, but we learned to fight with the pen. We learned that we can go into Te Ao Pākehā and learn their ways. They can't do that with our world, but we can walk in both worlds. We see the beauty that comes from walking in both worlds, because people without a vision, you're going to perish. Regardless, that's just how it goes. So a vote for vision, well, for me really is, I'm still learning, but I'm enjoying the journey. I'm going to have fun while I'm doing it. But I'll fight. I will fight when I need to. Not just because that's just what politics do, because I'm still trying to figure out what that word is. But I will fight for my whakapapa, for our people, for all people. So yeah, freedoms New Zealand.
E mihi ana ki te PSA, me o koutou nei āpiaha e kawe ana i ngā tini kaupapa. Together we thrive through shared opportunity and hope. I want to leave you with that, because the challenge right now, at this moment, at this next election, is so stark that unless we get out and register every whānau to vote at this next election, everything is at risk. I don't say that lightly, because I too have been the benefactor of legacy leadership that has made things happen in the face of adversity and with very little. And I've been given the opportunity to represent Hauraki-Waikato with confidence because you support me. I want to acknowledge the other candidates that are here, but this is about ideas and the future of our country. And I truly believe that if we want the future of our country to work towards a treaty-conscious future that embraces partnership, that looks for equity, that makes sure the most vulnerable will get ahead, that will ensure that all our children have an opportunity, then the choice in my mind is very clear. Because to do nothing will mean that an ACT-led national government enabled by New Zealand First will take us backwards, and we can't have that. Sure, we need young people participating, but we need all the people that young man over there was talking about who might feel disconnected from the system. We need them participating. We need our mothers and grandmothers and daughters participating. We need our kaumātua participating, and here's the reason why. What's at stake is the kind of future that will build an inclusive economy with more opportunity, that will lift all our ambitions for the future. Together we thrive when we work with shared aspiration, opportunity and hope for the future. Nō reira, mihi ana kia tātou katoa. Again, I've been given the pleasure to serve. I'm not on the Labour Party list. If you want me, you must vote for me. If you want Labour to continue to support the aspirations of our country, you must vote Labour as well. Kia ora.
Kia ora mai nā tātou. You know, putting your shingle up and standing for election is not an easy task. We've had a bit of heat here today, but actually it's nothing compared to the heat that Māori candidates, and it goes without saying, particularly Māori women candidates, get from many within the Pākehā world, Pākehā media, and we've seen that at a scale that I think has been unprecedented over the last little while. So, you know, kia ora mai nā tātou to you, putting your name up, getting your argument up there, and what I do ask is let's ensure that we do get out on and vote. Remember, you can enrol right up to election day and including election day. So if we're going to be progressive about this and we're going to think strategically, we can do something that is relatively easy. We can think about 2 people that aren't enrolled, get them enrolled, pick them up on election day and get them to vote. Kia ora mai nā tātou. I'll hand it back to the RSA, to the PSA.
I should go there after this.